Welcome to the channel. Today's story is full of surprises and real drama. Subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's dive in. I used to think everything was perfect as I lay in bed, holding my green stuffed frog, Charlie, tight against my chest. Things had been tough for the last 18 months. My parents were married for 6 years, and we had a happy, normal life. Then everything changed. It started with some small arguments, but before I knew it, they were shouting at each other all the time, and the family I knew was gone. I had no idea how it got so bad, and I couldn't see it coming. It felt like a storm building up, with little problems turning into big ones, like rain turning into a huge downpour, followed by loud crashes and angry words. I lay there, chin tucked into my chest, nuzzling my nose into Charlie's fuzzy head. I could hear my mother screaming again. This time, it was because my father was unable to make the 3-hour trip for a visit he had scheduled months ago. It had to do with work or something. I found myself numb to the ever-growing spew of reasons. I didn't care anymore. I had spoken to my father on the phone twice in the past 14 months and seen him once. I didn't expect him to come. My mother was a different story. You never realize how much a woman can change when she loses the man she loves, and her heart shatters. Sophie always seemed more upset that she wouldn't see my father rather than him caring enough to make the trip to see me. Even after 18 months, she was still in love with him. When he left, she tried to fill the void inside her with some light drinking and occasional wine with dinner, going out for drinks with friends every now and then. These were all completely normal for an adult to do in my mind. It was when things began to escalate that I could see my mother was developing a problem. One glass of wine at night turned into numerous glasses throughout the day. Going out for a drink once a week turned into not going out once a week. The drinking had stopped a year ago. That was when Sophie found out my father had remarried. The news came without notice, just a call one afternoon to announce that he had met someone a year ago, they had gotten married in a tiny ceremony a week ago, and that he was moving 5 hours away with his new wife and her son. A love story wrapped up in a 5-minute phone call. I didn't blame my father for hiding it. For the same reason I didn't blame him for not making more of an effort to see me since the split. My mother was a different person. The loving, warm woman who loved to bake oatmeal cookies, color with crayons, and never once swore that woman I knew as my mother was replaced with an empty, cold woman who, when she wasn't furiously angry, was an emotionless zombie of a mother. But my mother putting away the alcohol wasn't the blessing it should have been for me. The bottle had been replaced with a needle. I noticed the telltale signs of narcotics use right away but couldn't put the pieces together, and realized that's where they pointed. I noticed her sudden drop in weight, the heavy bags under her eyes, and the fact that she never slept at night. Whereas before, my mother was constantly yelling at me about something, making me feel like my father leaving was my fault, making me feel as if I ruined her life. At least now, she stopped yelling and would mostly just leave me to myself. While this wasn't the ideal life for me, I saw it as an improvement, and figured things could continue to get better over time. Then, 3 months ago, my eyes were opened. I came home from school and had to use the restroom. The bathroom door was locked, and my mother was inside. "Mom, I have to use the bathroom," I said through the wooden door. My mother replied with a frantic tone, "You're going to have to wait. I'm busy in here." "Mom, I can't wait. I really gotta go," I pleaded with her. Her rushed tone spat back, "Just go away. Let me be. Go away." Like the majority of older houses, there is usually a trick to unlocking the bathroom door. I learned this trick long ago. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a butter knife, and returned to the locked entrance. I stealthily wedged the blade between the door and its frame. With an experienced flick of the wrist, I popped the mechanism, and the door slowly swung open. I looked at my mother, and the butter knife slipped from my then limp fingers and fell to the floor. Directly in front of me was my mother, sitting on the toilet, sprawled back against the tank, legs and arms spread out. On the middle of her left arm was a Justin-tightened rubber tube, on her forearm fresh needle marks, and on the sink counter next to her lay a needle, a bent blackened spoon, a lighter, and a small plastic baggie with white powdery residue. Sophie tried to reach out for me, tried to offer some kind of explanation, but instead, only incoherent babble fell from her lips. She dropped her hand in defeat, slinked back against the toilet, and let her eyes roll into the back of her head as the high took over. I stared, mouth gaping open, unable to move or think or feel. I witnessed my mother's fruitless attempt to explain. I saw the evidence, and while only being 14 years old, I was by no means a dummy. I knew my mother had just shot up with cocaine. Without making a sound, I reached up, grabbed the bathroom door handle, and slowly closed it behind me. I walked step by step to my room. I crawled into bed, reached out, pulled Charlie's furry body into my own, rolled to my side, stared blankly at the wall, and began to weep. It wouldn't be the last time I found solace in the embrace of my green frog, Charlie, and the solitude of staring at the wall. For the next 3 months, every time I saw my mother and knew she was high, I would slowly walk to my room, grab Charlie, and continue my position, staring at the wall and sobbing. This would happen 3 to 4 times a week for the next 3 months. I would come into the kitchen, see my mother with that drugged-out smile, and simply turn around and head to my room without muttering a word. She never seemed to notice. Then again, she never seemed to notice anything these days, whether it was my failing grades, the letters from my teachers that came in the mail, or the black eye I came home with after a fight at school. Sophie wandered around the house in a complete haze, totally oblivious to the world around her. Today would probably be no different, I was thinking to myself as I walked home from school. I dreaded school. I dreaded coming home. I dreaded just about everything in my life. I especially dreaded the thought of coming home to find my mother high again. I knew the odds were likely. Her drug use was growing noticeably over the past couple of weeks. I wasn't angry at her. I loved her more than anything in this world and simply felt complete sadness that she was hurting so much inside that she had to resort to drugs. I just wanted my mother back. As I reached my destination on the sidewalk, made the turn, and headed to my front steps, I bit my lower lip. This is it, let's see how high she is today, I thought to myself, considering the condition of my drug-addicted mother. The handle turned slowly as I opened the door and entered the house. It was silent inside, but it was always silent inside. The television disappeared months ago, and Sophie never listened to music anymore. I slid my shoes off at the door and let my backpack drop from my shoulders to the ground as I closed the door behind me. "Mom, I'm home," I called out, somehow like every day, holding on to the smallest, tiniest chance of a miracle that she would call back to me like she used to over 18 months ago. Silence. I dreaded that. Usually, she would make some half-hearted response, and the silence usually indicated she was occupied at the moment by her attempts to get high. Slowly, I walked from the front of the house to the kitchen. I noticed a piece of paper sitting on the table. With a snatch, I had it in my hand. Notice of eviction. All residents of this property are hereby ordered to vacate the premises no later than 10 days from receiving this letter. I had feared this. I feared that Sophie would be using all of her money to feed her drug habit. My fear had come true. We had just over a week to find a new place to live. I wondered just how much worse my life could get. Then I saw it out of the corner of my eye. It was the toe of her sneaker. It was sticking out from behind the big brown recliner in the living room. I quickly rushed over to her location. Another fear had come true. She was on her back on the living room carpet, her skin pale and colorless, her eyes staring blankly into the air. A small gasp escaped my lips. My hand cupped my mouth as I stared at her body. My hand then went to her mouth and no breath came forth. Then my fingers went to her wrist. Among the old track marks there was no pulse to be felt. I then raised my hand to her forehead and felt the fartookled skin. I looked into her eyes and saw a peace I hadn't seen in 18 months. No anger, no cocaine high, no sadness. I crawled next to her, reached out, grasped her hand, and pulled it into my chest. Rolled to my side and stared blankly at the wall. I was too dead inside to weep. The large raindrops splashed off the top of the dark brown casket. The irony of a rainy day funeral was lost on me as I stared at the wooden box that held my deceased mother. I observed the 20 or so people who decided to attend the burial ceremony. The small crowd creating a semicircle around the casket consisted of mostly people from my neighborhood, smattered with a few of Sophie's old friends. All of them had known her during the better years of her life. All of them seemed to have abandoned her over the past 18 months as she slipped deeper and deeper into her own personal void. Hypocrites, I thought to myself. I could feel the bitterness and contempt building within me. The only emotion I had felt since I had finally left laying next to her deceased body was hate. Being around this gathering of people was doing nothing to reverse that. That feeling dwelled within me now as I looked over the people who disregarded her when she needed them the most. Those people who did not find a need to attempt to rescue her from the vices that ruined her life. They did show up, however, when those demons finally took it. Hate is a powerful thing, and I felt nothing but that for these people. The seed had been planted 6 days before when I finally left her side after being there for 2 hours and traveled next door to inform my neighbor. That seed was slowly watered as the police came to my home, roped off the house, and drew the attention of the entire block. They all gawked and stared. They passed their judgments, and made their demeaning remarks. They were there to see her body wheeled out, covered by a thin white sheet. None of them cared when she was alive, when she needed them the most, but they all stood at the pew of righteousness, feeling better about who they were as people because they weren't the ones suffering. Damn them, I swore in my head. That seed of hate quickly became a sprout, and over the next 6 days leading to the funeral, it would grow rapidly. I hated my father, Richard, who couldn't make the trip the day he got the call, forcing me to stay with neighbors I barely knew and who obviously felt so inconvenienced by my being there. I hated my stepmother, Olivia, and her son, Liam, for coming along. Neither I nor Sophie had ever met the two, but somehow they pretended to care enough to attend the funeral. Having met them for the first time just 8 hours earlier had given me time to hate other things about them. I hated Olivia's shallow, fake smile when she met someone. I hated Liam's almost perfect blonde hair and beautiful features that donned too much makeup for his 16-year-old face. Liam was only 3 years older than me, but with his overdone cosmetics and revealing fashionable clothes, he looked to be 19. Me, with my dark brown hair and humble looks, with my baggy sweatshirts and outdated jeans, was the exact physical opposite. Right away, I hated Liam for that. Hate is an interesting thing. As I stood there among the funeral's attendants, in between my father and stepmother, all I could feel was hatred. It didn't matter that my dead mother was about to be lowered into the ground. Emotions can be drugs. For 18 months, I was a constant user of sadness. When she died, sadness was no longer effective. I needed a hard drug. That drug was hate, and I was addicted. The drive to my father's house was unbearable. Liam, with his stylish green cell phone that slid open 3 different directions, sat next to me and had been talking for 3 straight hours. If you could call that talking. I had lost count of the number of OMGs and LOLs sputtered by my bubbly stepbrother. It had also been a drive of empty, one-sided conversation with my stepmother. "So far, we are happy to have you live with us," Olivia commented to me with so much fake sweetness it almost gave me a cavity. "I'm happy too," I said to my father. The first words he had spoken directly to me since the funeral. "We had to rearrange Olivia's angel room and turn it into a bedroom for you, but it was no big deal," my dad remarked kindly. "Not for you maybe, but you try putting together a room for a teenage girl with such short notice." I didn't have time to paint, I didn't have time to pick out new drapes, I didn't have time to do any real decorating, not to mention finding a suitable place for my babies. My stepmother shot at my father. I muttered confused, "Babies?" "Olivia collects porcelain angels and had the whole room filled with them." "It's okay though, you needed the room more," my dad informed me through the rearview mirror. I could see my stepmom roll her eyes at my dad's last sentence. My dad continued, "It's not much, a dresser and a bed, a small nightstand and a lamp. Well, work on making it more to how you want it as you get settled in. Maybe decorate it with those silly kittens you love." "I haven't been into kittens since I was a..." I began to reply but was almost immediately interrupted by Olivia blurting out, "Kittens? Richard, please, no girl in my house is going to decorate her room with kittens." I was already planning some really modern color patterns with. Olivia trailed off as I stopped listening. I could see my stepmother become exuberant talking about the interior design of my new room. I didn't care, so I drowned her out. The second 3 hours of the trip had been easier on me. Olivia put on a thick cloth beauty mask and fell asleep. Liam switched from talking on the phone to clicking away at its keyboard and listening to the white earbuds of his bright green iPod. My father drove silently as he listened to the low drones of a sports talk show on the radio. I studied my father through the mirror. The past 18 months had changed him. He was tan and leaner. He seemed to have lost the goofy, carefree demeanor I knew for so long growing up. It appeared to have been replaced with a heavy sense of seriousness, and almost a detachment from everything and everyone around him. It was almost like he was drowning out the world. "I miss Mom," I blurted out. I didn't know why I said it. I didn't plan to say it. It just came out. Immediately, as the words escaped my lips, I felt dumb for saying it in this car, around these people. "Me too," I heard my father say solemnly. I looked at him through the rearview mirror. I saw his eyes filled with deep sadness, the kind of sadness you feel only after a horrible loss. Then I saw my father's eyes filled with tears as a couple dropped to his shirt. He quickly rubbed his eyes and reached to the radio, turning the volume up. Maybe I didn't hate him so much after all. I caught myself nodding off as we pulled down my father's road. Their road. The reality just hit me that this was now the street my new home was on. Everything in my life was still in a constant state of change, so it was a bit surreal as the car passed through the middle-class neighborhood filled with clean white picket fences and neatly trimmed, perfectly clean lawns. They came to a stop in the nicely paved light gray driveway. To the left of the car was a basketball hoop, in front was the white door to a two-door garage. Attached to the garage was a beautiful three-bedroom white house with navy blue shutters. It looked like something out of a magazine. Suburban paradise. I slung my canvas duffel bag over my shoulder as I exited the car. It's amazing how light the bag was, considering it held everything I owned, except for one thing, me green fuzzy frog, Charlie, who was tucked under my left arm. As I approached the house via the concrete walkway, I clutched him so tight that if he were alive, he surely would have suffocated by now. Step by step, slowly, I came to the navy blue front door. I stood there, directly across from it, and just stared. Everything looked so perfect to me. The shutters and door matched to the exact perfect hue. The driveway was absent of a single crack or blemish. The grass was green, the sky blue, and in the distance, I could hear the chirping of birds. I had been living a nightmare, and now I stood in what seemed to be a dream. I was snapped to reality as Liam rushed by me, bumping my shoulder hard and sending me sprawling forward. I was just able to catch my footing and not meet the concrete front step face first. "Why don't you and your stupid frog watch out?" my stepbrother said with bitterness. I collected myself and looked Liam up and down. So many violent thoughts bounced around my head. Thoughts of pulling that perfect blonde hair out of his skull were the most prominent. For even just a moment, I had taken a break from that dark personal realm of hate, but like an old friend, it had returned. With that feeling brewing within me, I entered the house, able to control those temptations to inflict pain and torture upon my stepbrother. I closed the front door behind me, already so cynical and doubtful that this new life could be any better than the last. If staring at a wall was an Olympic sport, I would be a gold medalist. I lay in my new room, the former den of porcelain angels, and stared at the beige wall. It had been 4 hours since I slung my canvas duffel bag onto the foot of my new bed and proceeded to lay down, clutching Charlie and fixating my eyes on nothing but the wall. The room was average-sized, but being adorned with only a twin-size bed, a small nightstand which held a smaller lamp, and a cream-white dresser, it felt huge. Huge and empty. Empty like me, I thought to myself. Entering the room those long 4 hours ago, since then, I had laid unmoving on top of a quilt. It was one of those quilts you get at a designer home supply store that people pay way too much for because they think it looks genuinely homemade. I was immediately reminded of Olivia with how fake and corny it looked. Like her, it tried way too hard to be something it wasn't, in an attempt to impress everyone. I did have something to be thankful about in those previous 4 hours. I was not bothered a single time. Not one time did someone stop in to see how I was doing, to ask if I needed anything, or just to check in. For this, I was grateful. I didn't want to see anyone, talk to anyone, or be around anyone, especially the people in this house. While my father wasn't horrible, he just reminded me too much of my lost mother, and how much life had changed in 2 short years. The layout of the house actually complemented my solitary desires. The front of the house held the living room, dining room, and kitchen. On the right of the house were the bedrooms of my father and Olivia, and Liam. To the left of the house was a large bathroom, the laundry room, and then my room. Lying in my bed, I was at all times at least 50 feet away from everyone. Mathematical blueprint equations like this are what kept my mind busy as I gazed at the wall. A knocking at my door popped my tranquility bubble. I was no longer alone. The voice of my father rang through my door. "Liz, can I come in?" "Maybe he'll go away if I don't say anything," my voice pondered in my head. "Liz, are you okay? Look, I know you probably don't feel like doing a lot. Losing your mom was probably really devastating to you. I'm here for you, Liz. We're going out to this nice Italian restaurant in town. They have some great lasagna. I wish you would come, but I understand if you don't want to. The new house and everything is a lot to take in. Remember though, Liz, I know we haven't spoken much or seen each other much the past few years, but you're still my little girl and I love you. Always." My dad's heartfelt speech was shrewdly interrupted by the shrieking voice of Olivia. "Richard, let's go, or we're going to miss our reservation." The magnitude and tone of Olivia's cry made me wince in my bed. I could faintly hear my father's hand fall to the handle of my door. At that moment, a significant part of me wished he would open the door, come inside, and hug me. That part of me yearned to have my father hold me close like when I was little and make me feel like everything was going to be all right. But then the bitterness of reality came calling. Or rather, yelling. "Richard, you get out here now, or we're leaving without you," Olivia hollered with such sharp poison. I could hear the door handle jiggle just a tiny bit as I realized my father's hand had fallen away, and he was now retreating to Olivia at the front of the house. In that moment, the portion of me that ached for my father's love began to wither away, and as I heard the front door close and the car drive off, leaving me alone in the house, it all but died. The sunlight pierced through the white shades of my bedroom window and felt warm on my skin. I groggily raised my head off my pillow and realized that I had fallen asleep. Glancing at the clock on my nightstand, I noticed that it had only been an hour since my father stood behind my door. Bored, curious, and well aware that I had the house to myself for at least another hour, I decided to venture from my room. As I opened my door and stepped out into the hallway, I immediately noticed the amount of pictures on the hallway walls. These were high-class portraits of Olivia and Liam, and a rare occasional one with my father. They all had the same trendy look as everything else in the house. I found myself admiring a particular one of Liam. "He's so beautiful. He looks like a supermodel," I thought to myself as I looked over the close-up on Liam with his face in his hands. The focus of my eyes shifted, and I could now see the reflection of myself against the glass of the picture frame. I examined my average blue eyes that I thought were too big and round. I frowned at my shoulder length, unkempt brown hair and the round cheeks that I thought resembled a chipmunk. With the immediate comparison to Liam's high cheekbones and feline exotic-looking blue eyes, I felt like a potato next to a rose. Just down the hall, I could see the entrance to Liam's room. I moved swiftly down the hallway and stood in front of the door, contemplating whether or not to go in. It lasted 2 seconds as I quickly turned the handle and gently pushed the door open. Without stepping through the threshold, I could examine the entire room. Liam's bedroom resembled a stylish New York City studio apartment. His bed was positioned at an angle 5 feet from the back corner. Built into the opposite far corner was a mahogany computer desk. It was adorned with a green laptop, stacks of notebooks, pens, and folders. The entire room was colored in deep browns and light greens. One thing in particular caught my eye. To the left of the door, between 2 tall windows with light green curtains, stood one of the most stunning sights I would ever seen. My eyes were now transfixed on a gorgeous ivory vanity. A row of 3 drawers was the base, with a shorter row on top of that. There was a grand oval mirror fixed to the top, and the glass was outlined with beautiful floral etchings. The entire vanity sat on 4 legs that were sculpted top to bottom into wooden roses. Without thinking, I took slow steps into Liam's room, my eyes spellbound by the luxurious piece of furniture. As I slowly approached the vanity, I, with the movement of someone approaching a previously undiscovered treasure, reached out and let my fingers grace the ivory bench standing in front. It was smooth marble with a plush light green velvet pad to sit on. My hand crept from the bench to one of the pearl handles of the bottom drawers. With great caution, I slid the drawer open a few inches. My fingers danced inside and pulled out a tube of lipstick. I admired the gold base and the cosmetic's deep red color. I turned it over, and on the bottom of the base, I read Crimson Fantasy. Through the empty hall of the house, I could hear the closing of car doors in the driveway. I felt panic rush through me as I scrambled to gain my senses. I quickly pushed the open drawer shut and made my way to the door of Liam's bedroom. As I crossed under the door frame, a wave of alarm crashed over me as I realized the tube of lipstick was still in my hand. Before I could turn around to return it, I heard the knob of the front door turn. Not wanting to get caught snooping in my stepbrother's room, I reached for the door, closed it quickly but silently, and bolted down the hall for my room. I ever so quietly shut my own door and resumed my place lying in my bed. I shut my eyes to feign sleeping as I could hear the 3 new members of my family enter the residence. I could feel the percussion of my beating heart against my chest as I lay there. I hoped that no one saw me outside my room and, more importantly, anywhere near Liam's room. Each second felt like an hour as the minutes slowly passed. With no sudden intrusion, I began to feel relief, which was quickly squashed by a soft but sharp knock at the door. Thinking it wise to still fake taking a nap, I did not answer. But before a second knock ever came, the doorknob turned, and I could hear someone enter the room. Through the utter silence, I could hear the door close softly and someone approach my bedside. Keeping my eyes shut and attempting to keep my heart rate from beating like a hummingbird, I felt the shift of weight as someone sat next to me on the bed. "Liz, I know you're not sleeping. Open your eyes. I want to speak to you about what I just saw when we came in the house." Olivia's voice rang through the room and was the missile that sunk my heart. One eye after the other, I slowly opened each and rolled to my back. I pulled myself up on the bed and tucked my knees into my chest, resting my chin on my knees. I hugged my legs and tried not to make eye contact with my stepmother. "I saw you coming out of Liam's room. I want to know why you were in there," Olivia questioned. 1,000 excuses raced through my mind, each one sounding more and more outrageous than the next. I was suddenly overcome with hopelessness and despair. I pondered that maybe if I was honest with her, maybe, just maybe, this woman could understand me and even attempt to aid me. I was curious and wanted to look around the house. I barely got out from my quivering lips. I saw Liam's room first, and it was amazing. Everything is so beautiful. He is so beautiful. Then I saw the vanity, and it made me wonder. Maybe I could find out what makes him so beautiful. The side of Olivia's mouth curled up in a slight smile. Her eyes showed pity onto me. "Liz, I understand. Liam is a gorgeous boy. He's my perfect little angel. He looks like a movie star. He is perfect. I can understand you wanting to be like him, to look like him. But honey, women use makeup to highlight their features, and I'm sorry, but you just don't really have anything worth doing that to. No matter how long you sat in front of that mirror and no matter how much makeup you put on, you're still going to look like you. And you should be proud of that." "Lots of beautiful boys wish they could look more natural," Olivia said, dripping with a passive-aggressive, backhanded, insulting tone. "Plus, pretty boys don't ever have to work for anything in life. They get the world laid at their feet. You won't have to deal with that. You can develop your own little personality." I looked down at my knees as her words hit my heart like a sledgehammer. It took everything I had not to let the tears flow from my torn soul. Olivia stood up from the bed and headed to the door. She stood in the doorway with the door in her hands, ready to close it. She peeked her head back in and looked at me. "And I know you've been through a lot, but I wanted to warn you that your father is going to be really busy. Not only is he doing a lot of overtime at work, but Liam needs him with his solo for the school musical he's going to be in. And I need him there for me to deal with the hurt and pain of having to put my babies in a box in our closet. So I hope you understand that he's just not going to have a whole lot of time for you for a while. After all, you came into our family," Olivia said with massive amounts of harsh resentment. As Olivia closed the door behind her, my emotions were not conquered by the drug known as hate. Deep in my heart, I felt abandonment and loneliness. My mother, the only person who truly loved me, had given her life to drugs. And now the one place I might be able to call home, the one place I might find hope, love, and a new beginning, didn't want me. At that moment, I felt like a single star perched in a night sky filled with nothing but darkness. At that moment, I felt like the only answer was to escape the pain, to let the darkness extinguish my starlight, and to take my own life. The quilt lay underneath me, undisturbed. It had been 4 hours since Olivia came into my room and said the words that cut through me like a knife. It had been 4 hours since I had first contemplated taking my own life as a solution for my tragic problems. It had been 4 hours for me to lie there, staring at the wall, holding Charlie ever so tight, and go back and forth on the decision to do it. It was now 2 in the morning. The red numbers on the alarm clock next to my bed pierced the darkness. I hadn't had much of an appetite in the previous week, but now I found my stomach growling like a caged tiger. Mulling over the consequences of the last journey from my room, I decided the chances of everyone being sound asleep were good enough to venture forth to the kitchen. Once in the hallway, I tiptoed toward the kitchen with Charlie in tow. I emerged from the end of the hallway, took a right, and was at the opening of the kitchen within 10 steps. Luckily for me, the multiple expensive appliances offered enough luminance through the dark for me to manage a path to the marble tile floor. The ground felt cold on my bare feet as I crossed from the carpet of the hall to the kitchen. My hand traced over the long matching marble counter as I found my way to the double-door refrigerator fixed against the back wall. Like all the other appliances around me, it was gleaming stainless steel. I reached for a handle on the front of the refrigerator but found nothing to grasp. Squinting my eyes and looking closer, I found that except for a pencil-thin line separating the two doors, the surface was totally flat. Stumped and still hungry, I made my way back to the long counter where I thought I had seen a basket of fruit. I found it there in the center of the marbly perfect hand-woven basket holding a variety of fruit. My stomach grumbled when I saw what appeared to be a juicy red apple. I snatched it quickly in my hands and found it to be slick and odd. I looked closer and realized that the apple was wax, and out of the top hung a small wick. I frowned and set the apple imposter back in its home. Disappointed, I decided to give up on my quest to relieve my hunger. Just as I was about to turn out of the kitchen, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. After my last experience from exploring the house, I found myself stricken with fear and anxiety. I feared the passive, bittersweet wrath of my stepmother. But before I could move, there now stood a shadowy figure at the end of the hallway and was taking its steps toward the kitchen. Out of pure instinct, I found myself shutting my eyes and cowering. "Liz, is that you?" It was the voice of my father that rang through the darkness, calling out to me. I found myself slowly releasing from my tight ball of protection. "Yeah, it's me, Dad," I responded back to him. While the largest portion of my fear had subsided, I found myself still a bit wary of letting myself feel totally comfortable. "What are you doing up at this hour?" My dad's voice sounded weary and tired but also expressed concern. "I don't know. I'm hungry, I guess. I was trying to find something to eat, but the refrigerator handle is broken, I think," I offered my explanation. I could hear my dad chuckle under his breath. He walked past me wearing his navy blue flannel pajama pants and crisp white cotton t-shirt and stopped in front of the fridge. He motioned me over with a small hand gesture. I obeyed and walked over, standing next to my father. He pointed to the bottom of what appeared to be the right door of the steel object. He placed his finger 3 inches to the left of the pinstripe line and pressed. The door released from its grasp and exhaled a deep breath of cold air. A small awe of the obviously expensive technology was felt by me but was soon replaced with a wonder why my dad needed a Jetsons refrigerator. It, like everything in the house, seemed to all be put together for the simple purpose to impress others, not to be practical but to be the talk of those who saw it. I, who had spent the last couple of years shopping for my mother and me and microwaving most of my dinners, found myself just not feeling the need for all the hoopla. While I pondered what other domestic devices had secret hidden entry methods, my father had removed a glass bottle of milk and a plate of cookie bars. He then placed his hand gently on my back and guided me around to the other side of the countertop. There I found a row of wooden stools with puffy black cushions. My dad pulled out one and let me sit first, then he found his own sitting next to me. The hunger pains grew sharply as he pulled the plate of cookie bars in front of us. The graham cracker base was covered by a swirl of chocolate. My mouth watered as I reached for my first one. For the next 5 minutes, we sat in silence. Swallowing my second rich cookie bar, my stomach, while now satisfied, was telling me just how good some cold milk would be. After a quick scan of the counter, I turned to my dad. "We need glasses," I noted. No glasses," he said rather bluntly. "This is my time. I come out here once a week. I get to be alone. I get to drink from the bottle. I get to be by myself." I suddenly found myself assuming that my father was giving me a hint. I mumbled what was an attempt at a quick apology, and started to get up from my stool. I wasn't telling you to leave, kiddo. My time is now our time. It gives me a chance to share some cookies and milk with the daughter I haven't seen nearly enough of lately, he told me warmly. My father grabbed the large bottle of milk, his hand wrapping around the neck, and he brought it to his lips. With a bend of the wrist, he swallowed 3 large gulps. The bottle was then returned to the counter, as he let out a soft belch. I giggled a tiny bit as I looked up at my dad and saw a long white milk mustache above his upper lips. What? He questioned, feigning confusion and returning a big warm smile. Then he slid the bottle over to me and nodded for me to take my own drink. I placed my small hand on the neck of the bottle, my fingers barely wrapping halfway around. My other hand found the bottom in order to lift it to my lips. I tilted the glass container and took a large chug of milk. The bottle once again found the table as my small body let out a high-pitched pip of a burp. My father looked over at me and gave a hearty chuckle as he saw a massive matching milk mustache dripping from my lips. The morning sun penetrated through the windows in my room. It was now Saturday, 8 hours after my late-night dessert snack with my dad, and for the first time in a long time, I awoke with a feeling of hope. While that feeling was still very small, it was doing a good job of distracting me from the dark emotions that overwhelmed me daily. Rolling out of bed, I scanned my bedroom floor and found the same denim blue jeans I had worn the day before. With only a few pairs of pants, I often had no other choice but to wear the same pants 2 or 3 days in a row. Today was no different. As I lifted the worn fabric from the ground, something fell out of my pocket and bounced off the carpet. Reaching down, picking it up, and examining it, I found myself looking at the lipstick from Liam's room. I have to give it back, I uttered, groaning to myself out loud. My head hung low as I held the cosmetic tube tightly in my palm. I realized there was no way I could make this journey alone. Quickly, I snatched Charlie up in my left arm and seized him to my side. I turned and made the slow journey from my room out into the hallway. As I walked, I imagined Liam's response in my head. At worst, I predicted that my stepbrother would take the makeup back and command me to get out of his room. At best, I envisioned Liam appreciating my honesty and welcoming me to use his makeup and extraordinary vanity anytime I wanted. Realistically, I knew that it was more likely to fall closer to the worst side. The pounding of my heart felt like a jackhammer inside my chest as I reached my stepbrother's door. Making a loose fist, I brought my hand up, flicked my wrist, and using my knuckles, tapped lightly on the door. The soft beat was followed by no reply, so I used a little more force this time, increasing the volume of my knock. "Come in," came the voice of Liam through the door. Moving with the caution of a gazelle entering the den of a lioness, I ever so slowly turned the handle and creaked the door open. The door crept open, and I could see Liam sitting on the bench in front of the vanity, looking into the mirror and brushing his perfect straight blonde hair. The 2 step-siblings made eye contact through the mirror. Liam spoke first. "What do you want?" The nerves inside my stomach wound even tighter, hearing the sharp tone of Liam's voice. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Regardless, I took a few steps into the room, unsure of what to say and unclear if I would even have the clarity to form the words. I simply extended my arm out towards Liam. "I didn't mean to," was all I could muster as my fingers lethargically crept off the tube of lipstick and revealed it in the palm of my hand. With my head bowed in shame, I could still see my stepbrother through the mirror. As soon as Liam's gaze came to the item in my hands, his eyes widened in shock and then quickly squinted in fury. "You stole my makeup," Liam accused me as he shot up from the bench and turned to face me. "I was just looking at it, and then..." My soft, almost whisper-like explanation was quickly cut out by Liam's harsh words. "You were in my room, and you took my makeup, you ugly little brat. Just because you look like a troll doesn't mean my makeup will fix that. You'll never look like me. You'll never be me. You're not even supposed to be here. You're not even a member of this family. Your father never loved you enough to see you, and you're only here because he felt sorry for you, you pathetic little loser. How would you like it if I took something of yours?" Liam's words hit my soul like poison arrows shot from point-blank range. I winced at each one, not feeling anger in return. Instead, I found myself feeling shame and emptiness. Liam wasn't finished. "Not that you have anything worth taking. Even your stupid little frog is ugly. How would you like it if I took that? It might do you some good to grow up and not be such a baby, carrying it around all the time. With Liam's last words, he reached out, grabbed the dangling arm of Charlie, and pulled sharply. I was caught off guard but came to my senses enough to catch the end of Charlie's leg and initiate an immediate case of tug-of-war over my green fuzzy frog. Stop! You'll hurt him! I pleaded with my stepbrother. Hurt him? What are you, 6? Liam shot back. Please stop. You'll never come in here again. Just let Charlie go, I begged, this time with my stepbrother trying to secure my stuffed frog and find solace in my own room. You bet you'll never come in here again, and this frog is mine now. Liam gave a heavy pull, so strong it pulled me forward 2 steps. Let go! I shouted loud in both anger and desperation as it was my turn to give Charlie a mighty tug. Except, when I pulled, Liam didn't come forward like he had. Instead, there was a loud rip sound that pierced the air. The tension on Charlie's leg was gone as his body fell back to my possession. It was missing an arm. I looked up, and what happened before me took place in slow motion. It was almost like time slowed down as I watched Liam lose his balance after Charlie's arm ripped off in his hand. Liam stumbled backward, flailing, unable to catch himself. But it was too late. I watched in shock as Liam fell back into the vanity, sending it crashing to the ground and falling on top of it. The glass of the mirror shattered, and Liam fell in a heap on top of it. Before either of us could move, there were 2 loud, heavy sets of feet running down the hallway. First to appear in the doorway was my father. He stared in awe of the sight before him. Second to arrive was Olivia, who upon seeing her baby boy lying on top of the broken vanity mirror, let out a shriek of terror and horror. She shoved my father aside and ran to her son. Liz, what did you do? Were the first words to come out of my father's mouth. Before I could mutter an answer, Olivia interjected. I'll tell you what she did, Richard. She came in here to ask Liam if she could use his makeup. When Liam said no, Liz got so jealous and angry that she shoved poor Liam right into the vanity. The vanity, by the way, that was one of a kind and will take me forever to replace. Olivia's baseless accusations came forth so freely. She had turned again to her son, who was now sitting up. Liam appeared to be fine, save for his now messy hair and a 2-inch superficial cut on his left cheek. It was a cut so shallow that while it was red, it couldn't produce a single drop of blood. And look at my poor baby. That's going to scar, I know it. I know it, Richard. We have to take him to the emergency room. He may have internal injuries. I'm going to get him into the car. You take care of that girl. Olivia seemingly refused to refer to me as Richard's daughter. Olivia helped Liam to his feet, and putting her son's arm over her own shoulder, helped him out of the room. As they passed by me, Olivia shot me a look of anger and bitterness. Once they were out of their room, my father turned and faced me. Liz, is what Olivia said true? Richard asked me softly and solemnly. Shaken by the events of the last 15 minutes, I struggled to find words. I became aware that it might appear I was trying to think of an excuse, so I just babbled whatever I could get out. Dad, I didn't. I was quickly interrupted. Don't lie to me, Liz. Please do not lie to me, my dad immediately accused and commanded at the same time. But I'm not lying, I stammered pitifully. I could see both growing anger and disappointment in my father's eyes. Liz, I want you to go to your room and stay there the rest of the night. I'm going to take Olivia and Liam to the ER. Do not come out. And tomorrow is your first day of school, and you are going. I don't want to hear anything else about it. I'm so disappointed in you. I really thought this could work, Liz. I really did. But now I'm starting to wonder if maybe you'd be better off somewhere else. My dad trailed off in such a disheartened tone that it almost brought tears to my eyes. If I wasn't already so empty inside, it would have. Slowly, I walked past my father and turned down the hallway. I stopped just inside my door and looked once more back down the hallway. My father stood with his head bowed under Liam's doorframe. Dad. I attempted to communicate one last time. Just go to your room, Liz, my father spoke, defeated, as he turned and walked to the front door. I slowly closed my own door behind me. Crawling into bed, I laid Charlie next to me. Lying on my side, I traced my finger over the giant rip where his frog arm used to be. Now he's torn just like me, I thought to myself. I wrapped him up in my arms and stared at the wall. I played back my recent memories in my head, starting with finding my mother dead in my own home. Slowly, darkness crept over my heart. Slowly, feelings of emptiness, abandonment, and loneliness swept over me. As the images in my head reached the present, I found my heart and soul drowning in a sea of numbness. I was finally overcome. I had reached my breaking point. The feelings inside me overcame me, and I was convinced that I no longer had a place in this world. The only person who truly ever loved me had died, and I wanted to follow her. As I closed my eyes, I made up my mind. There was no turning back now. Tomorrow would be my last day on earth. After school, I would return home, and with everyone out of the house and all alone, I would take my own life. How one could wake up to the last day of their life and feel completely serene perplexed me. I had been lying awake for the past half an hour, watching my alarm clock. That alone was an interesting event to me. Each tick of the minute, each change of the digit was like a slow countdown to my final moment on Earth. Watching the slow expiration of my life be tallied away was a new experience. Then again, it wasn't quite staring at the wall. I wanted to see as little of the 3 other people in my house as possible. It was going to be my last day alive, and I didn't have any desire to deal with the cold stare of my stepbrother, the artificially sweet passive-aggressive tone of my stepmother, or the complete indifference of my own father. I had heard them arrive home from the hospital just an hour after they had left last night. I had heard my stepmother's shock and anger with the emergency room nurse who refused to admit her son over a superficial laceration. I had also heard my father's adamant refusal to schedule an appointment with a plastic surgeon over an injury not much larger than the average paper cut. So I had arisen at 5:30 that morning and took the quickest, quietest shower of my life. Quickly I had slipped on a plain worn navy blue hooded sweatshirt, and a faded pair of blue jeans that were 2 inches too long for me. Then I proceeded to do the time watching that took up my entire morning. It was now 7:15, and I, already politely turning down my father's mumbled offer to have some cereal, slung my canvas bag over my shoulder and headed to the front door of the house. As I slipped out of the front door, I made sure to lock it behind me. Everyone had already left for their respective day's agenda. My father was now at work, Liam was at a morning musical practice, and my stepmother, Olivia, was presumably out shopping. Earlier that morning, when my father made a flat-effect offer of cereal, he was also quick to mention that there would be a school bus in front of the house at 7:30. I was lucky to have heard that as I made every attempt to drown each individual word that escaped his mouth. After traveling down the walkway, I found myself standing where it met the sidewalk in front of the house. As I waited for my transportation to school, I found my mind swirling around the different ways I could do the dark deed that afternoon after school. Before I could let my imagination go into too much detail, I was snapped to attention by the hydraulic brakes of the long, large yellow metallic beast in front of me. With my head down and attempting to draw the least amount of attention possible, I boarded the bus and found an empty seat halfway to the back. Trying not to make eye contact with anyone, I clutched my bag and kept my head lowered. Within my peripheral vision, I could see a pair of black canvas high-top Converse with hot pink laces settled on the bus floor across the aisle. That was enough for me. I didn't dare to let my eyes drift up and draw the attention of whomever those feet belonged to. The ride to school quickly became a sudden place of suicidal meditation for me. I let my eyes wander to the ground between my feet as my mind did a warp-speed review of my life and the options I had to end it that afternoon. Just as I was about to settle on the route in which I would take to no longer exist, I found myself feeling lifted up slightly in my seat. Being snapped to attention, I realized my sudden change in personal elevation was from the plopping down of someone next to me on the large cushioned bench. With the sudden intrusion of the private space next to me, I found myself almost gawking at the person now sitting next to me. It started with the black shoes and hot pink laces that were once across the aisle but now were on the ground next to my own worn white tennis shoes. My eyes traveling up found a pair of legs clad in black leggings, a red plaid high skirt, a white long-sleeved dress shirt with a black corset vest, and a long, very loose knotted red necktie hanging around a pale neck. Moving my view to the face of the intruder, I found a girl who had a huge smile plastered across her face. Her big smile made her already round cheeks puff out even more over her cheekbones. My eyes then met the glittering innocent-looking eyes of the girl next to me. I found that I was nervous and quickly dodged my eyes away and was now looking at the girl's head. On top of it was a black cadet hat with a big red cross on the front. Under the hat were long auburn curls of hair that fell a couple of inches past her shoulders. "Hi, I'm Riley. What's your name? Sorry if I'm intruding." "I don't mean to intrude. You looked kind of sad, and I've never seen you before. You look like you could use a friend. Not that I'm saying you don't have friends, because how would I know? I know nothing about you. Not even your name, which is why I just asked it, of course," the girl next to me said in such a hyper-frantic tone that I almost had to hold my jaw from dropping. I hesitated my response for a sheer moment, and Riley jumped all over it with another energetic, boastful response. "I'm so sorry if I scared you." "I did, didn't I? I knew it. I don't always talk like this, just when I meet new people or when I get nervous. It's kind of like a tic or something. But now I'm sitting here scaring the poop out of you, talking like an over-the-top Saturday morning cartoon character hopped up on a truckload of pixie sticks or something. So, what's your name?" Liz. Liz Carter," I surprised myself by managing to let my name spill out as a response. "It's blessed to meet you, Liz Carter," Riley said in a very joking tone that still made me feel embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I was just joking. It is great to meet you. We're going to be best friends." "I already know it." "Probably not," I muttered while staring at the ground. "I knew it. I came off as this babbling monster and totally scared you. I don't blame you. I'm not the most normal person. That's probably why I don't have too many friends. I mean, I have some friends in my youth group, but at school, not really. Most people are nice and all, but not friends, you know? No one there who really knows me. But if you don't want to be friends, I understand," Riley's words implanting into my mind, making me realize this was the most anyone had spoken to me since I could last remember. "No, it's not you. It's not like that. I just am going to be moving soon. Real soon." I found a way to try and brush her off without letting Riley know the real reason I wouldn't be around to be friends. "Really? Wow. I've never seen you before, so that must mean you're new here, and now you're leaving. That's odd. Well, that means we have one day to become the bestest friends in the entire world. That way, when you leave, you have to keep in touch with me," Riley said in such an optimistic, happy tone that she once again caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say. While the last thing I wanted to do was make friends with someone on my last day alive, I wasn't mean enough to brush Riley off. Not that Riley seemed like the type who could be brushed off. I decided that it probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to let someone sit next to me on the ride to school, as long as I could get her to stop talking. "I don't really feel like talking today," I tried to be nice about getting Riley to not talk my ear off. Riley was very polite in her reply when she said that's okay. Some of the best things are not even said. She then reached into the side of the backpack between her legs and pulled out a pink iPod. Without asking, Riley placed one of the white plastic earbuds into my right ear. She slipped the other one into her own left ear, pulled her knees up into the back of the seat in front of her, and slinked back, relaxing. I started to object. "Sure, we're not talking," Riley was quick to remind me with a coy, matter-of-fact tone. I gave up my half-hearted fight and let myself relax back into the seat also. The music playing into my inner ear canal was an alternative rock band I had never heard before. It was heavy on bass and drums, and the little bit of lyrics I did listen to didn't seem to fit the normal rock music mold. Just before leaning my head against the bus window, I glanced down at the face of the digital music player. I could make out the name of the band playing as it was listed on the small screen. It read Skillet. The school day went by being neither too eventful nor memorable for me. Still planning to go through with my plans after school gave me no reason to take in the details of the school, whether it was the teachers, my locker combination, or much of anything else. The things I did notice were few and far between, such as that the high school was averagized and that half the boys and girls in my freshman classes resembled my stepbrother Liam in their expensive brand-name clothes, an obvious over-prioritization of their looks, and a snooty demeanor of self-worth. I did have 4 classes with Riley, the girl from the bus. Attempting to convince myself not to care, I attempted to nicely ignore her throughout the day. Riley made that hard as she would playfully throw pieces of paper at me just to get my attention so she could make goofy faces at me from across the classroom. She did this in every class we had together. It made it rather difficult for me to concentrate on just how I was going to finish my mortal tenancy after school was out. As the last bell rang, I bolted as quickly as I could to the bus without drawing attention to myself. I planned to find a seat with someone else in order to avoid Riley. Boarding the bus, I groaned. I was the first one on. With my plan foiled, I found the same seat I occupied that morning. Somehow it didn't surprise me when the second person on the bus was Riley. It surprised me even less when Riley plopped down right next to me. Riley looked at me, placed her 2 pinched fingers to the corner of her full lips, and pulled them across like a zipper. She then turned an imaginary key, which she then pretended to throw out of the open bus window next to us. Bowing my head, I tried to hide the smile I couldn't resist having after such a goofy display. The ride home was much like the ride to school. Riley once again placed the earbud in my ear, and once again, we listened to alternative rock music. I could hear the instruments, but with my mind slipping away, thinking about this being my last hour on Earth, I didn't focus on any lyrics. With a release of air, the hydraulic bus brakes came to their first stop. With the bus not moving, Riley reached into her backpack and pulled out a neon green gel pen and a small notebook. She quickly wrote something inside the notebook, and then ripped out the paper that the fresh ink was on. Tossing the notebook back into her bag, she then folded the paper in half and wrote something on the top of it. The bus had started back up again, but after only traveling a few hundred feet, came to the second stop. Riley quickly scrolled through her iPod, hit the pause button, and pulled the earbud from my ear. Wrapping the tiny white headphones around the electronic device, she placed it in my hand and curled my fingers around it. Then she grabbed my free hand and placed the note gently into my palm. But I was cut off by Riley's finger pressed against my lips. Riley shook her head, pointed to the note, and with a quick motion, grabbed her bag and stood from the seat. I looked at the note in confusion and looked back up at Riley. There was no one there, and the bus had started to move again. I examined the top of the note that lay in my hand. Scribbled on it, I saw, "Don't open until you get home." Unsure of what to do, I slid both the note and the abandoned iPod into the front pocket of my hooded sweatshirt. Before I could think, the bus came to its third stop. Looking up, I realized this was my exit. I collected my bag, and with each step, suddenly realized I was walking to my own death march. Soon I would flee the world that had brought me so much pain. Once off the bus, I quickly made my way to the front door, unlocked it, and bolted inside the house, locking the door behind me. I went straight to my room. I found my fuzzy green frog buddy, Charlie, and gripped him close as I took a seat on the edge of the bed. Not wanting to scare myself out of it, I decided right then I needed to get my dark deed over with. Without giving it much thought, I came to the conclusion that I needed to silence the suffering now and extinguish my own flame of existence. I reached down, grabbed the bottom of my hooded sweatshirt, and pulled it off, revealing my white tank top underneath. Knowing exactly how I would attempt to join my mother in death, I arose from my seat on the bed. Then something caught my eye. The shiny pink iPod that had fallen out of my top lay on the ground next to my garment. I reached down and picked it up. Bent over, I also noticed the corner of Riley's note sticking out of my pocket. I grabbed it also and returned to my seated position on the bed. I placed the iPod on my lap as I opened the note. In pretty neon green gel pen was written, "Just press play and listen. Please listen. Really listen." I figured I could give the one nice person in my life a last request. I placed the earbuds in my ears and let my thumb circle over the play button. After some hesitation, I pressed play. An acoustic guitar's melody came through and entered my head. At first, I just listened to the rhythm, and then I remembered the note. So I listened. I really listened. I let the words flow through my ear and into my skull. But they didn't stop there. The more I listened, the more they sunk into me. The more I listened, the lower the words entered me. When the chorus came through the tiny speakers, it was penetrating my heart, piercing into my soul. It was then that for the first time since my mother died, I began to cry. My tears poured from within me, and I had no idea why. They were tears of sadness, hurt, and grief. But as the song played on, they became tears shed as release and relief. I curled up on my bed, my knees buried in my chest as I wept. The teardrops flowed like rain as I felt a great heavy burden lifted from within me. The song came to an end, and I quickly pressed play again. I listened to it for a second time, this time crying harder and heavier. I heard every word that was sung. The chorus of the song seemed to play just for me as it rang right into my very spirit. I felt every word, and I'll be by your side wherever you fall, in the dead of night whenever you call, and please don't fight these hands that are holding you. My hands are holding you. It was then that one thing became clear: I would live another day. The next morning, I woke up not remembering when or how I had fallen asleep. Glancing at my alarm clock, I noticed the time was 6:30 in the morning. Even with a rudimentary estimation, I deduced that I had slept for a minimum of 13 hours. Usually, when one sleeps for over half of an entire day, they awaken to feel refreshed. However, this failed to be the case for me, who immediately felt the weight of my emotional burdens press on me like a heavy boulder. Further noticing my surroundings, I quickly snatched up Riley's pink iPod that had fallen to the floor next to my bed. Swinging my legs over the side of the bed, I then stood and stretched as hard and far as I could. A primal moan escaped my lips as almost every muscle, ligament, and tendon in my body extended and then constricted. As quickly as I stopped stretching, a massive yawn escaped my gaping mouth. Haggard was the best word to describe how I was feeling. I felt worn down, beat up. Even after what seemed to be an eternity of sleep, I still felt as if the world chewed me up and spit me out. It also felt like I had been stepped on by circumstance and stuck to reality's shoe. Unsure and too confused to understand exactly what feelings caused me to cry the night before, I concluded that even if I had been pulled off reality's size 10, I was still just a piece of chewed-up gum lost in what was more of a case of self-actualization than self-loathing. I barely heard the knock on my door. A shift of my eyes and my focus landed on the digital digits of my alarm clock. Somehow, 30 minutes had passed, and the time was now 7 in the morning. Without an utterance of my acknowledgement or approval, the person behind the door knocking became the intruder opening the door. I didn't have to see or hear the approaching guest coming through the door frame. My nose hairs curled, and I wondered how my stepmother's expensive perfume could smell so cheap. Olivia, wearing a buttercream ruffled sleeveless top and a matching red sleek knee-high skirt, strolled into my room without a hint of seeking my permission. The click-clack of her fashionable heels echoed in my mind. I could hear and see her speaking to me, but what was processed as sound in my head was much more comparable to a high-pitched air horn. I bet she would buy a bottle of cow pee if they called it perfume and put Beyoncé's name on it, I couldn't help but think to myself. The conversation ended rather abruptly, as much of a one-sided encounter as it was, with Olivia babbling in my direction and me attempting to have at least a half-hearted look of interest. Through the nodding and polite smiling, I was able to make out that Olivia was informing me that breakfast was on the table. Not very sure what she had said that they were having, it wasn't until Olivia reached the open door to leave that she turned. It was then that I heard her speak a statement so clear and concise it was like a verbal dagger aimed right at my heart. Besides, Liz, fruit and wheat toast is exactly what you need. You need to start working on that extra baby chub anyway. It's the only way you'll ever get a boyfriend. Maybe then you'll finally stop being so depressed and selfish already. We don't want to end up just like your mother. Olivia's words one by one came forth from her lips like a guided missile set on the destruction of my very spirit. If it wasn't for the immediate closing of my door behind her exit, there was a very good chance I would have leapt at her throat like a rabid pit bull. Instead, I found myself barely able to hold in an animalistic scream of rage. Suppressing my fiery emotions ravaged my heart. Bitter anger, hatred, sorrow, and fury flowed through me like the raging waters of the high seas crashing within me. Unable to escape physically, the powerful erupting feelings within caused me to grip my left arm with my right hand like a vice. Lost within myself and my emotions, I could not feel the strength in which I grasped my arm. I could not feel my fingernails dig into my own flesh. I could not feel the blood begin to trickle down my arm. It took the raised voice of my father coming through the bedroom wall to bring me back to reality. Liz, we are all heading out for the day now. Make sure you don't miss the bus. I love. My father's sentiment was cut off by the screeching voice of my stepbrother Liam. We are going to be late. I cannot be late. The adolescent rant of my step-siblings sounded like nails on a chalkboard to me. Within an instant, I could hear the slam of the front door. I was now alone. It was then that I felt the warm trail of blood slowly flowing down my arm. Panicking, I frantically attempted to wipe the blood away. Instead of cleaning up the plasma that journeyed down my arm, my fingers smeared it across my skin. I quickly removed the same blue hooded sweatshirt I had worn the day before and wiped the blood from my arm. Applying pressure to the 2 fingernail-shaped holes just below my elbow on the underside of my arm, I was able to quickly stop the bleeding. It was then that I noticed the time on my alarm clock and cursed at it for forsaking me. I had exactly 15 minutes to get dressed, gather my things, and meet the school bus in front of my house. Without hesitation, I bolted to the bathroom down the hall. Quickly, I scoured the medicine cabinet and located the box of Band-Aids. After using them to cover the marks on my arm, I sprinted back to my room where I quickly removed the rest of my clothing. Reaching into my still-packed suitcase, I pulled out the first top and bottom I could find. In a hurry, I slid on a pair of faded denim jeans whose fray and rips weren't a sense of style but simply the actual wear and tear of year-old pants. Following my pants, I pulled a white t-shirt over my head, grabbed my canvas book bag, Riley's pink iPod, and bolted to the front door. Just seconds from the bus pulling away from the front of my house, I made it in time. Boarding my giant yellow cab to school, I almost forgot about the strange enigma that was Riley. But when I saw the glowing massive grin plastered across Riley's face as our eyes met, I remembered the entire previous day. Pretending that I didn't see Riley, I took the same bench I chose the first trip to school. Without much hesitation, there was a quick plop next to me, and I wasn't alone. I wanted nothing more than to convince myself that I wasn't happy to have the beaming smile of Riley next to me. But I knew deep inside that it was just a facade. Feeling a tiny bit of warmth in my gut, I pledged to myself to at least not let Riley witness my satisfaction. The body of my seat companion pressed against me, and all of a sudden, I could feel the bulge of the digital music player in my pocket. Reaching into my pants, I pulled out the hot pink iPod, placed a single earbud in my own ear, placed the other earbud in Riley's ear, and then handed the device over to the girl next to me. As Riley scrolled through the music and pressed play, alternative rock came through the headphone into both our ears. Out of the corner of my eye, Riley could see me respond with a warm, tiny smile. Riley's smile only became bigger when she felt her head lean against my shoulder. The day went by in a blur for me. In the hustle and bustle of schoolwork, joining teachers, and the sea of students, all I could remember when the final bell rang was every silly goofy face Riley made at me during our classes together. It was almost as if I had been lifted from my real life and placed in a time freeze where all that existed was this impractical teenage girl, and the ridiculous ways she attempted to make me smile. Happiness had been a stranger to me for so long, and at least for today, it had been like passing an old friend on the street. That's what worried me the most as I walked the route to the school bus, the worry that when it came time to return to the den of anguished emotions that I now called home, that old friend would be once again long gone. I didn't have much time to think about those thoughts too long. Quickly, I was on the bus, and even quicker, Riley was next to me. Reluctantly, I raised my focus to meet Riley's eyes. Like a volcano trying to hold in its erupting lava, my attempt to refrain from smiling failed rather miserably. The grin painted across my face was akin to that which you might find painted on the bust of a cartoon clown. It wasn't my fault. I couldn't help myself. After spending the day with Riley as the prescription to my morning's illness, I could do nothing to contain the overwhelming happiness I felt when I looked at my new companion. So, I've decided that we can talk again. I mean, I'm surprised I went this long. The last time I went that long without talking. I don't think I've ever gone that long. Talk about painful. Let's never go that long again, Riley nodded with strong affirmation. Never, I responded with my own over-the-top nod that made my hair flop into my face. So, how was your day today? Tell me all about it. From the time you woke up until this very moment right now. Tell me everything, Riley fired out her words like a verbal machine gun. I murmured while trying to think of a way to not speak of that morning. I woke up and got ready for school. I went to school and watched this crazy girl make weird faces at me all day, and now I'm here. Sounds like such a strange person to just make faces at someone like that, and during school? What the nerve, Riley replied with sarcastic condemnation. Following her playful rant about the strange girl, Riley's stern, serious face suddenly became a twisted display of squinted eyes, puffed out cheeks, and a wagging tongue. A split second passed before both of us burst out laughing, holding our stomachs. We leaned into each other and suppressed our giggles. So, Riley started her sentence by elongating the syllable, and each word making a different pitch. Tell me all about you. Where did you used to live? What does your mom do? What does your dad do? Why did they move here? If a heavyweight prizefighter were to punch you square in the gut, it wouldn't hurt as much as the heavy brick that now sat in mine. The question she just asked not only brought up the painful memories of my deceased mother and my absentee father, but also the sting that I quickly realized I was going to lie to Riley. We used to live in San Francisco. My dad is some computer programmer whiz, and we moved here because he got promoted to some big job. My mom works in real estate, and she's always showing houses, so both of them are gone most of the day, each word drenched with dishonesty. I found myself clinging to the hope that Riley would believe my lie. Wow, that's awesome. So, your dad is like the next Bill Gates or like Tom from MySpace or someone. What kind of stuff does he program? And where does your mom sell houses? Tell me, Riley pleaded with me to let her know more about my life. Well, I paused in order to manipulate a false tale in my mind. My dad works for the government, so I don't know anything about what he does exactly, and my mom just started selling here, so I don't know either. Secret government spy stuff? How cool! I bet your dad is like a complete secret agent man. I bet his watch has a laser in it. Riley became so intrigued that I realized I wouldn't have to worry about her not believing my lie. The loud hydraulic brakes gushed out air, and the bus door creaked open. Shoot, this is my stop. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Miss Liz Carter, daughter of the world's top super undercover ninja government operative. Riley bounced down the aisle and out of the bus. Letting my head slump, I felt relieved to have that over with, but also felt quite guilty that I had to deceive my new cohort. I gathered my things together, knowing that my stop was almost there. A minute passed, and I was at my stop. I made my way out of the bus, and was quickly surprised by the sight in front of me. Not expecting Olivia to be home until later, I was caught off guard seeing her car parked in the driveway. A massive wave of fear and painful remembrance from our encounter that morning had me hesitating to even take a single step towards the house. A mental recap played in my mind of that morning's unpleasant experience, and the malicious words from my stepmother. The dread of facing Olivia again twice in one day had me on the brink of tears. But then something else crept inside my mind, that of a mangled, abnormal girl's face. A face that shouldn't be able to look as goofy and silly as it somehow did. My mind's eye was now focused on the plethora of animated faces from my day at school. A rush of confidence filled within me, and I became certain of one thing, that no matter what Olivia said or did, she couldn't take away the next morning's bus ride. No matter what happened tonight, I would have Riley there tomorrow morning to make me forget it all. Eliza's journey has been full of pain and unexpected hope. Do you think she can find peace after everything she's been through? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching.